The first thing I saw through the observation port didn't match the file. Rubble fields, the blank dark where transponder signals should be when you drop into a dead system. I've seen that 6 times. I know what colonial failure looks like from orbit. Dark settlement grids. Maybe a distress beacon still cycling after however many years. Atmosphere processors gone cold. You learn to read the silence. You learn what it means when a world isn't talking back. Kepler 5 was talking. I pressed my hand against the viewport and counted. Lights in concentric rings spreading outward from a central mass. Agricultural domes catching the sun at the terminator line. Transit corridors linking the rings like spokes on a wheel. Movement. Actual movement. Vehicles or transit cars, I couldn't tell from this altitude, but something was moving down there. That's not right. Dahl, our pilot, didn't look up from his console. Coordinates check. This is Kepler 5. Run them again. He ran them again. I watched the city turn beneath us and thought about the manifest in my cabin, the one I'd memorized on the 18-month transit, the one that listed 1,700 colonists and their supply needs and their equipment requests, and then, in 2142, stopped. Final entry. Standard resupply request filed. No response to confirmation ping. Colony status, unknown. 30 years of unknown. 30 years of nothing. The stellar positioning came back clean. Kepler 5, no question. Get me the captain. Orbach didn't believe me until she saw it herself. Then she stood at the viewport for 3 minutes without speaking. Longer than I'd ever seen her go quiet. How many people? She finally asked. I can't tell from here. The settlement grid suggests a significant population, more than 1,700. The original manifest, 1,712 colonists. Final count before contact loss. She turned away from the viewport. Her face had that particular flatness I recognized from other bad situations, the expression of someone running calculations they didn't want to complete. We follow standard protocol. Hail them, request landing clearance, assess on the ground. Whatever happened here, they're still colonial subjects. We still have a job. The job. I went back to my cabin and pulled up the 30-year-old manifests, the equipment lists, the last supply request they'd ever filed. Medical supplies, water filtration components, seed stock for a second agricultural expansion. Normal requests for a colony in its 6th year. Nothing that suggested they were about to go silent for 3 decades and then build a city. I started a preliminary assessment file. Colony designation, Kepler 5. Status on arrival, unknown. I deleted unknown and stared at the blank field. The hail took 4 attempts before someone answered, and when they did, the terminology was wrong. Harlan 9, you are cleared for descent to Pad 7 Tertiary, Outer Ring. Welcome to the Cradle City. Transit will be arranged upon landing. Cradle City. The original colony was named Kepler Landing. I'd read the founding charter. Confirmed Kepler Control, requesting clarification on designation Cradle City. Our records show this settlement as Kepler Landing. Silence. Then, apologies, Harlan 9. We have no record of that designation. Cradle City is our only municipal name on file. Transit will be arranged upon landing. I looked at Dahl. He shrugged. The descent took 40 minutes. I spent most of it at the viewport, watching the city resolve from abstract pattern into concrete detail. The outer ring was residential, block housing, community structures, the familiar shapes of colonial infrastructure. The second ring looked administrative. The third was harder to read, something institutional maybe, and beyond that the buildings grew stranger, their geometries less certain, until everything converged on the central mass. It was dark. That was my first clear impression. Dark and large and shaped like nothing I had a word for. Organic maybe, if I had to pick something. Like a growth. Like something that had accumulated over time rather than been built. The colonists had arranged their entire city around it. Pad 7 Tertiary was clean and well maintained. That was the first detail I catalogued when the ramp came down. The condition of the landing surface, the functional state of the guidance lights, the absence of the decay you'd expect from 30 years of neglect. A small delegation was waiting at the edge of the pad. 3 people in uniforms I didn't recognize, all of them smiling. I came down the ramp with my manifest pad and my assessment checklist and my 30 years of dead colony documentation, and a man stepped forward to meet me. Tall, mid-40s maybe, a face that looked like it spent a lot of time smiling. "Welcome to Cradle City. I'm Administrator Shepard. We're honored to receive the Harlan 9. His hand was warm when I shook it. Dry. Normal. "Garrett Morgan, Cargo Manifest Officer. I'm here to assess colonial supply needs and coordinate delivery of emergency provisions." The smile flickered, just slightly. "Emergency provisions?" "Standard resupply package for a non-responsive colonial settlement. We're carrying 18 months of emergency rations, medical supplies, water purification equipment." "I see." Shepard's expression shifted into something I couldn't quite read. Confusion, layered with something else. Concern. "Mr. Morgan, I appreciate the company's diligence, but I'm not certain we require emergency provisions. Our supply situation is quite stable. Your colony filed its last resupply request 30 years ago. You've had no contact with colonial authorities since 2142. The confusion deepened. "I'm not familiar with that date. What significance does it have?" "It's when you stopped communicating. It's when the company listed Kepler 5 as a potential loss." Shepard looked at his colleagues. One of them, a woman with grey hair and a patient expression, gave him a slight shake of the head. "Mr. Morgan, I think there may be some confusion. Our records show regular communication with off-world parties. The Cradle City has maintained stable operations for as long as anyone remembers. Year 0 forward. Year 0. The founding of the city, when the Cradle first began its dreaming." He said it casually, the way you'd mention the weather. "But I understand you've had a long journey. Perhaps we could continue this discussion at the archives. They'll have more complete records than I can provide from memory." I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull up my manifest pad and show him the founding charter, the original colony designation, the names of the 1,700 people who'd arrived here 35 years ago expecting to build a new world. But something in his expression stopped me. Not hostility, not suspicion, just a blank certainty that made argument feel pointless. "The archives. Yes, I'd like to see your records." We walked. Shepard offered a transit car, but I wanted to see the city at ground level, feel the texture of it under my feet. The outer ring was residential, just as it had looked from orbit. Block housing arranged in rows, community centers, small markets with people moving between them. Normal people doing normal things, shopping, talking, children running between buildings while adults called after them. I stopped at a residential block and ran my hand along the foundation. The concrete was weathered in a way that takes decades. Settlement patterns in the material. Hairline cracks that only form through years of thermal cycling. This building had been here for a long time. Problem? Shepard had paused a few paces ahead. "This structure, how old is it?" I couldn't say precisely. The city has always been more or less as it is now. The Cradle provides what we need and we build as we're able. But construction records would be at the archives. That patient smile again. "I understand your curiosity, Mr. Morgan. We'll find you the answers you're looking for." We kept walking. The second ring was administrative. Municipal buildings, food distribution centers, what looked like a medical clinic. I noted the infrastructure age as we passed. Same weathering patterns, same settled quality, everything looking like it had been here for generations rather than decades. The math refused to work. Even if the original 1,700 colonists had survived, even if they'd expanded aggressively, they couldn't have built this much this fast. The population density alone suggested 200,000 people, maybe more. Where had they all come from? I stopped at the clinic. "I need to check something." Shepard waited while I went inside. The staff were helpful. A young man at the reception desk, a doctor who emerged from a back room when I asked to see their medical records archive. They showed me their files without hesitation. Patient records, treatment logs, birth and death certificates. Everything organized, everything professional. The records began at year 0 and ran forward in a clean, unbroken line. "These are your complete medical archives?" The doctor nodded. "Going back to the founding, we maintain thorough records." "And before year 0? The question seemed to confuse him. "There is no before year 0. That's when the city began, when the Cradle first dreamed us." I looked at the files. 28 years of records, nothing earlier. The documents covered only Cradle City's citizens, with no reference to an original colony, Kepler landing, or the 1,700 people who had supposedly founded this settlement. "Thank you for your time." The third ring was where things changed. The architecture shifted as we crossed into it. Buildings grew taller, their angles subtler, their purposes harder to identify. The streets curved inward more sharply, and I could feel the central mass ahead of us even when buildings blocked the view. A weight in the direction of the city's heart, pulling everything toward it. Checkpoints marked the boundary, but they weren't guarded in any military sense. People in simple robes stood at the transition points, nodding as we passed, noting our presence without attempting to stop us. Attendants, Shepard called them. Volunteers who helped maintain the inner rings. Maintain them how? The Cradle requires observation, care. We take turns ensuring it sleeps peacefully. The Cradle sleeps? It dreams. Shepard's voice dropped slightly the first time I'd heard anything other than pleasant certainty in it. It dreams us. The city. All of it. We exist because it imagines us. And as long as it sleeps, as long as it keeps dreaming, we continue. I waited for him to smile, to indicate that this was a metaphor, or local custom, or some kind of founding myth dressed up as belief. He didn't. What happens when it wakes? The silence lasted 3 full breaths. We don't know. We prefer not to find out. The archives occupied a building on the third ring's outer edge, close enough to the center that I could see the Cradle between the rooftops. It was larger than I'd realized. Darker. Its surface had a texture I couldn't quite resolve. Stone, maybe, or something like stone, but with variations that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Organic. That word kept coming back. Like a tumor. Like something that had grown rather than been built. The archivists were eager to help. A woman named Olive led me through their stacks, showed me their records, answered my questions with the same patient confusion I'd encountered everywhere else. They had documentation going back 28 years. Census data, construction permits, agricultural yields, everything a functioning colony should maintain. The record from year 0 onward was meticulous and complete. The archive simply began there, as if nothing earlier existed. I pulled out my manifest pad and showed Olive the original colonial charter, the names of the founding families, the equipment manifests from the first 5 years of Kepler Landing's existence. She studied it for a long time. I don't recognize any of these names. They're the original colonists, the people who built this settlement. But we built this settlement. The city grew around the Cradle as it dreamed us into being. There were no... She stopped, looked at the charter again. This equipment you've listed, some of these specifications match what we use in the outer ring. But these names, I've never seen them. They existed. They filed requests with the company. They were here. Olive's hands had developed a slight tremor. She set the pad down on the archive table carefully, like it might bite her. I think you should speak with Senior Archivist Welkin. He's been here longer than anyone. If there are records we've somehow overlooked. She didn't finish the sentence. I didn't push her. While I waited for Welkin, I walked the archive stacks. The records were more complete than most colonies I'd assessed, living or dead. Everything labeled, everything organized, everything starting at year zero and proceeding forward in perfect order. I found the storage drawer by accident, a section of historical artifacts tucked away in a corner of the archive's basement level. Old equipment mostly, colony-era tools that had been replaced by newer models. I pulled open a drawer that hadn't been touched in years, judging by the dust, and found it half empty. In the back corner, a piece of metal caught the light. An equipment tag, rusted at the edges, stamped with a date, March 15th, 2137, Kepler Landing Colony, first year of operation. I held it in my hand and felt the weight of it. Real metal, real date, tangible proof that something had existed here before year zero, before the Cradle, before 200,000 people who remembered nothing. Footsteps on the stairs. Olive returning with welcome, probably. I slipped the tag into my pocket. When Olive saw the open drawer, her face went pale. "What did you find?" "Nothing useful." I showed her the manifest pad instead, gestured at the founding charter. "I was hoping to cross-reference these names with your artifact collection, but there doesn't seem to be anything relevant." She didn't look convinced. Her eyes kept drifting to the drawer, to my hand, to the pocket where the tag now rested against my thigh. "Mr. Morgan, if you did find something from before, I would ask that you handle it carefully. There are some things that disturb the city's peace, some things that make it harder for the Cradle to dream." I met her gaze and held it. "What happens when the Cradle's dream is disturbed?" Olive's mouth opened, closed. She looked like a woman trying to remember something that refused to come into focus. "People forget themselves, lose track of where they are, wake up in places they don't remember going." Her voice had dropped. "The dream becomes uncertain, and when the dream becomes uncertain, we become uncertain with it. Please, Mr. Morgan, whatever you found, leave it here. Let the archives keep it. Let it stay forgotten." The tag sat in my pocket. Real metal, real date. The only evidence I'd seen all day that the world made sense. I didn't find anything. She didn't believe me, but she also didn't stop me when I walked past her up the stairs, out of the archives, into the strange light of a city that shouldn't exist. Shepard was waiting at the entrance. He took one look at my face, and his smile faded. "You found something." "I found nothing. Your records are exactly as you described them, complete and starting at year zero. There's no evidence of any previous settlement." "But?" I looked past him, toward the gap between buildings where the Cradle's dark bulk loomed against the evening sky. I could feel it watching. Not with eyes, it didn't have eyes as far as I could tell, but with something, an attention, an awareness that pressed against the back of my skull like a thumb testing the ripeness of fruit. "I need to return to my ship. I have a preliminary report to file." The walk back took 2 hours. Shepard offered a transit car again. I refused again. I needed the time. I needed to think. The tag stayed in my pocket the whole way, solid and certain. I just couldn't figure out what it proved. Captain Orbach wanted to leave. She made this clear at 0500, standing in the corridor outside my cabin with her arms crossed and her face set in the particular expression she reserved for situations that had gone beyond salvage. "File a contamination report. Request extraction. Let someone else figure out what happened here. We don't have evidence of contamination. We don't have evidence that anything here fits within normal parameters either." She glanced down the corridor toward the observation port, toward the city lights visible in the pre-dawn dark. 200,000 people who don't remember their own founding. A city that shouldn't exist. Some kind of structure at the center that they worship like a god. That's enough for me to call it and go home. I pulled the equipment tag from my pocket and held it up to the corridor light. Rusted metal, stamped date. The only solid piece of reality I'd found in 16 hours on this planet. "This is from the original colony, 2137. Someone was here before year zero. Someone built something here before the Cradle started." Whatever it's doing. And what is it doing? I didn't have an answer for that. The tag sat in my palm. I need more time, one more day. If I can find documentation of what happened to the original settlers. You think documentation is going to explain this? Documentation is what I do. I closed my fingers around the tag. One more day. Then we file whatever report makes sense and we leave. Orbach studied me for a long moment. I could see her running the calculations, risk assessment, crew safety, company expectations, the 18 months of transit that would be wasted if we left now with nothing to show for it. One day, stay in contact, check in every 2 hours. And Morgan? She waited until I met her eyes. If something feels wrong, you come back. You don't investigate. You don't document. You run. I nodded. I didn't tell her that something had felt wrong since the moment I saw lights where there should have been darkness. The transit station in the outer ring was busy at dawn. Workers heading toward the inner rings, shift changes at what I assumed were manufacturing or processing facilities, the ordinary flow of a functioning city waking up. I stood on the platform in my off-world jumpsuit and no one gave me a second look. The car was clean. I found a seat near the back and watched the city scroll past the windows. Residential blocks giving way to administrative buildings, the architecture growing denser and more vertical as we moved inward. The other passengers read from tablets or talked quietly or simply sat with their eyes closed, commuters enduring the familiar tedium of transit. A woman across from me noticed my jumpsuit, mid-30s, professional clothing, a tablet balanced on her knee. Off-world? Harlan 9, resupply mission. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. We don't see many of those. The Cradle usually provides what we need. The Cradle provides supplies? The Cradle provides everything. She said it the way you'd say, the sun rises in the east. Obvious, fundamental, not worth questioning. It dreams the city into being, has since year zero. Before that. She paused and something flickered across her face. Confusion, maybe. Discomfort. There was no before that. Year zero is when everything started. But the colony was founded 35 years ago. Kepler landing, 1,700 settlers. The confusion deepened. I don't know those names. I don't think anyone does. Year zero was 28 years ago. That's when the city began. That's when we began. I wanted to push. I wanted to show her the equipment tag, the founding charter, all the documentation that proved she was wrong. But she was looking at me with an expression I was starting to recognize. The polite bewilderment of someone confronted with a fact that didn't fit their understanding of the world. Thank you for the information. She nodded and went back to her tablet. I watched the city flow past and tried to calculate the gap. 35 years since founding. 28 years since year zero. 7 years between the original colony and whatever had happened to create this place. 7 years for 1,700 people to disappear and 200,000 to take their place. I got off at the second ring and walked until I found another clinic. Different staff this time. An older man at reception, a woman in medical whites who came out when I explained what I was looking for. Founding era records, anything from before year zero. Medical histories, patient files, genetic registries, whatever you have from the earliest days of the settlement. The doctor's face did the same thing everyone's face did when I mentioned that period. That flicker of confusion, of discomfort, of something that wanted to be recognition but couldn't quite get there. Our records begin at year zero. That's standard across all municipal archives. The city was founded when the Cradle first began its dreaming. Everything before that is... She stopped. Her hands had started a strange fluttering motion at her sides that she didn't seem aware of. Is what? Uncertain. The Cradle's dream is the foundation of everything we are. Before the dream, there was nothing to record. We didn't exist yet. I pulled out my manifest pad and showed her the founding charter. She studied it, with the same expression Olive had shown yesterday. Not denial exactly, but a kind of categorical rejection, like the information simply couldn't fit into whatever framework she used to understand the world. I don't recognize any of this. These people existed. They filed medical requests with the colonial authority. They had genetic profiles on record, disease histories, the standard documentation any colonial settlement maintains. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. She handed back the pad. Our records begin at year 0. If there was something before that, we have no memory of it. No memory of it. Not no record of it. Like the absence wasn't only on paper, but in the people themselves. What happens to people who go too close to the cradle? The doctor's face went still. What do you mean? Administrator Shepard mentioned that the cradle learns people. That if you're close enough for long enough, you start to belong to the dream. I'm trying to understand what that means. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped. People who spend too much time in the inner rings sometimes lose track of themselves. They forget where they were going. They find themselves in places they don't remember walking to. Sometimes they forget conversations they've had, or remember conversations that never happened. Her hands were fluttering again. It passes, usually. The cradle is benevolent. It doesn't mean to confuse us. It's just dreaming. And dreams are imprecise things. Has it happened to you? Everyone who lives in Cradle City has been touched by the dream. It's part of being here. Part of being us. She met my eyes, and for a moment I saw something underneath the confusion. Fear, or acceptance of something she couldn't change. I would advise you not to go too deep into the inner rings, Mr. Morgan. You're not from here. The cradle doesn't know you yet. If it decides to learn you. She didn't finish the sentence. The checkpoints at the third ring were staffed by the same kind of robed attendants I'd seen yesterday. They noted my passage with polite nods but didn't try to stop me. I walked through and felt the architecture shift around me. Angles becoming subtler, proportions harder to pass, the buildings themselves seeming to lean inward like they were all trying to get a better look at something. The crowds had thinned. Fewer commuters here, fewer ordinary people going about ordinary business. The ones I did see moved with a different quality, slower, like they were swimming through something thicker than air. I passed through the second checkpoint, and the buildings fell away. The plaza opened in front of me like a held breath, wide and circular, paved with dark stone that might have been quarried locally or might have been something else entirely. At its center, rising against the morning sky, was the cradle. It was larger than it had looked from the outer rings, larger than anything had a right to be, a mass of dark material, stone or tissue or something in between, that rose in curves and folds like a body caught in the act of sleeping. Its surface had texture, but the texture refused to stay consistent. I'd look at one section and see something like scales, then look back and see something like skin, then look again and see something I had no word for at all. It wasn't moving, but it felt like it could start at any moment. At its base, arranged in loose clusters across the plaza, people were kneeling, dozens of them, maybe 100, not praying exactly, no chanting, no ritual motion, just being near. Heads bowed, bodies still, like they were listening for something that hadn't spoken yet. One of them looked up as I approached, and I recognized Shepard's face. He rose smoothly, brushing dust from his knees, and walked over to meet me. He didn't look surprised. Most visitors come this far eventually. The cradle draws them. It wants to know them. What does that mean exactly? Wanting to know someone? Shepard turned to look at the cradle. In the morning light, his face had a strange quality, like he was seeing something I couldn't, hearing something below the range of my perception. The cradle dreams. That's what it does. It's been dreaming since before the city existed, since before any of us existed, and when it dreams, it creates us, the city, everything you see around you. He gestured at the plaza, the buildings, the rings of settlement stretching outward. We are its dream made solid. We exist because it imagines us. And when it wakes, we stop. The simplicity of it hit me harder than anything else had. No hedging, no theological qualification. Just the flat certainty of a man who believed his existence depended on something remaining asleep. But where did it come from? The cradle. Who built it? No one built it. It was here. It's always been here. Shepard's voice had dropped, the way the doctors had, the way everyone's did when they talked about this. The first people to come to this world found it sleeping beneath the surface. They woke it, and it started dreaming. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the equipment tag. Held it up so Shepard could see the date, the colony designation. Kepler landing, 2137. The colony that existed before year zero. Shepard looked at the tag. His face did something complicated. Recognition flickering through, then giving way to confusion, then something that might have been fear. That's not... I found this in your archives yesterday. It proves something existed before year zero. There was no before. There has only ever been the city. The cradle dreams us into being. Shepard. He stopped. His hands were shaking slightly. I don't know what that object is. I don't recognize those markings. Whatever you think it proves, you're mistaken. He met my eyes, and underneath the denial I could see something else. A desperation, almost a pleading. Please, put it away. Some things are better left forgotten. Some memories. The cradle doesn't like when we remember things that weren't part of the dream. What happens when you remember? The dream becomes uncertain. He was backing away now, step by step, like I was holding something dangerous. And when the dream becomes uncertain, we become uncertain with it. Please, go back to your ship, file your report, leave this place. The cradle is benevolent, but it protects itself. It protects the dream. If you keep asking questions... He didn't finish. He turned and walked back toward the kneeling figures at the cradle's base, lowered himself to his knees, and bowed his head. I stood there for a long moment, the equipment tag cold in my hand, the cradle looming against the sky like a question I didn't know how to ask. Then I put the tag back in my pocket and started walking. The first checkpoint sat where I'd left it. I nodded to the attendant, a young man in pale robes who smiled and noted something on a tablet as I passed. The third ring's strange architecture pressed in around me. I kept my head down and walked fast, trying to process what Shepard had said. The cradle dreams. The city is its dream. The colonists don't remember anything before year zero because they didn't exist before year zero. They were dreamed into being, built from nothing, imagined into life, conjured by something that sleeps at the center of their world. It sounded insane. A colonial settlement couldn't just appear from nothing. 200,000 people couldn't be dreamed into existence by some sleeping entity. But the equipment tag was real. The founding charter was real. Something had happened here, and whatever it was, it had replaced 1,700 living people with 200,000 who remembered nothing. I was so deep in thought that I almost missed what happened next. One moment I was walking down a street in the third ring, heading toward the checkpoint that would lead me back to the second. The next moment I stood in a corridor I didn't recognize. The light was different. Dimmer, more amber, like the kind of emergency lighting you'd see in a malfunctioning facility. The walls were close on either side, institutional architecture, utilitarian, nothing like the strange organic buildings I'd been walking past. I looked down. My hands were dirty. Grey dust, like ash, worked into the creases of my palms and under my fingernails. I didn't remember entering any building. I didn't remember stopping. My manifest pad. I pulled it from my belt and checked the time display. 14:23. I'd been walking toward the checkpoint at 13:40. 43 minutes unaccounted for. I scrolled through the pad's recent activity log. File access, notes, standard documentation functions. Normal entries then. A note file I didn't remember creating. Timestamped 1351. I opened it. Integration protocols proceeding within expected parameters. Subject demonstrates standard resistance patterns but shows promising signs of dream compliance. Recommend continued exposure to inner ring proximity. The cradle will learn what it needs. The handwriting on the screen was almost mine. The same basic letter forms, the same general proportions. But something was off. The angles slightly different. The spacing not quite right. Like someone had studied my writing and tried to replicate it. I stared at the words and tried to make them mean something else. Subject. That had to be me. Someone, something, had written notes about me, in handwriting that was almost mine, on a device that never left my belt. I deleted the file, closed the pad, looked around at the corridor and tried to figure out where I was and how I'd gotten there. A door at the end of the corridor. I walked toward it, pushed it open, and stepped into an alley between two buildings in the third ring. The checkpoint was visible 50 meters away. The attendant in pale robes glanced up as I emerged, smiled, and noted something on his tablet. I walked past him without acknowledging the smile. Through the checkpoint, into the second ring, toward the transit station. The car was crowded with mid-afternoon passengers. I found a seat and pulled out my manifest pad again. The note file was gone. I checked the activity log. No sign that any file had been created between 1340 and 1423. The log showed clean, continuous use with a blank stretch where those minutes should have been. 43 minutes. Vanished. I looked down at my hands. The grey dust was still there, worked into my skin. The ride back to the outer ring took 2 hours. I spent most of it staring at my hands and trying to remember something, anything, about those 43 minutes. The corridor, the note file, the words that sounded like documentation of an experiment with me as the subject. Integration protocols, dream compliance. The cradle will learn what it needs. I thought about what the doctor had said. People who spent too much time in the inner rings lost track of themselves, found themselves in places they didn't remember going. The cradle touched them, and their sense of continuity slipped. Was that what had happened? Had I been close enough to the cradle for long enough that it had started to learn me? The transit car stopped at the outer ring station. I got off, walked toward the landing pads, checked in with the ship's security officer at the perimeter gate. Morgan returning. What time do you have? The security officer, a woman named Wilson who'd been with the Harlan 9 inches for 3 years, checked her display. 16:42. You're late for your check-in. I know. I lost track of time. The captain's been asking for you. She wants a status report. I nodded and walked toward the ship. The cargo ramp was down, and I could see activity in the hold, crew members moving equipment, standard operational traffic. Orbach was waiting at the top of the ramp. You missed 2 check-ins. I know. I was in the inner rings. Communication was difficult. She studied my face with the particular attention she reserved for crew members who might be compromised. I didn't know what she saw there, but whatever it was made her frown. Did you find what you were looking for? I found more questions. I walked past her into the hold, trying to orient myself, trying to feel normal. The colonists believe the cradle is dreaming them into existence. They think they only exist because it's asleep. They're terrified of it waking up. That's religious nonsense. Maybe. I stopped at my cargo station and pulled up the manifest I'd filed that morning. Standard inventory, standard documentation, standard 3 items I didn't recognize. Cultural materials, Cradle City Archive, 3 crates, transferred to local custody. Agricultural samples, inner ring distribution, 1 crate, transferred to local custody. Integration documentation, administrative archive, 2 containers, transferred to local custody. My signature at the bottom of each line, my timestamp, my authorization codes. Wilson, the security officer, looked up from her station. The cargo transfer this morning. The items listed as transferred to local custody. Did you witness the unloading? She frowned. What cargo transfer? There are 6 items logged as transferred today. 3 crates, 1 crate, 2 containers. My signature on all of them. Wilson walked over and looked at my display. Her frown deepened. I didn't see anyone unload those. I've been at the perimeter gate since 0600. Who else was working the hold? Marsh and Yolan, but they were doing inventory on the medical supplies. They didn't... She stopped. Her face went pale. Morgan, I don't remember anyone unloading those items, but your signature is right there. I walked down the ramp and into the cargo hold. Row after row of crates, the emergency supplies we'd brought for a colony that didn't need them. Everything in its place, everything accounted for, except for the spaces where 6 items should have been. Empty spaces. Gaps in the inventory where something ought to stand, according to my own documentation. Marsh was working at the far end of the hold. I walked over. The cargo transfer this morning. 6 items to local custody. Were you here when they were unloaded? Marsh looked up from his tablet. What cargo transfer? The crates that are missing, the ones I apparently signed out. He looked at the empty spaces I was pointing to. His expression shifted from confusion to the beginning of fear. I don't remember any crates there. I've been doing inventory all day. Those spaces have been empty since we landed. I checked my manifest pad again. The documentation was clear. 6 items, transferred today, my signature on every line. But the crates weren't here, and no one remembered them being here or moving them. The grey dust was still on my hands. I walked back up the ramp, past Orbach, past Wilson, into the ship's interior, into my cabin. Closed the door, sat on my bunk, pulled the equipment tag from my pocket and held it in my palm. Real metal. Real date. The one thing that hadn't changed shape under pressure. I thought about the note file that had appeared and disappeared. About the 43 minutes I'd lost. About the cargo that had apparently been unloaded by someone wearing my signature. Integration protocols. Dream compliance. The Cradle will learn what it needs. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bunk with the equipment tag in my hand, watching the city lights through my cabin's small viewport, and tried to figure out what question I should be asking. The Cradle had been dreaming for 28 years. It had dreamed a city into existence, 200,000 people who remembered nothing before year 0. But you couldn't dream from nothing. You couldn't create matter from imagination. Something had to be there first. A substrate, a foundation, raw material to build from. 1,700 colonists had arrived here 35 years ago. They had built a settlement. They had filed reports and requested supplies and lived their lives. 7 years later, they had vanished, and the Cradle had started dreaming. If I wanted to understand what the Cradle was, I needed to find out what had happened to the people it had replaced. The original colony. The original colonists. Whatever was left of them. The equipment tag sat in my palm, cold and certain, and I waited for dawn. Marsh didn't want to come with me. Whatever's happening here, it's not our job to investigate. We're cargo logistics. We deliver supplies and file reports. That's it. The supplies aren't needed. The report doesn't make sense. What's left? He was standing in the corridor outside his cabin, still in his sleep clothes, his face carrying the particular exhaustion of someone who hadn't rested well. I'd woken him at 0500 with a request that probably sounded insane. Help me search the outer perimeter for remains of the original colony. You're talking about driving out into unknown terrain to look for a settlement that supposedly doesn't exist. Based on what? A rusted equipment tag? I held up the tag. Let him see the date, the colony designation. Based on evidence. Physical evidence that contradicts everything the colonists believe about their own history. 1,700 people came here 35 years ago. They built something, then they vanished, and 200,000 people appeared who remember nothing before year zero. I put the tag back in my pocket. I need to know what happened to them, and I need a witness. A witness for what? For whatever we find, for whatever I might forget finding. That got his attention. Marsh was a surveyor by training. Geological analysis, terrain mapping, the practical work of assessing whether a world could support colonial infrastructure. He understood evidence. He understood documentation. And after yesterday, after the cargo that had vanished from the hold without anyone remembering it being there, he understood that something was wrong with this place in ways that went beyond cultural eccentricity. 1 hour. We search for 1 hour, then we come back. And if we don't find anything, then we file the report and leave. Agreed. He got dressed. I requisitioned a ground vehicle from the ship's equipment bay, a standard survey crawler, 6 wheels, pressurized cabin, nav system with automatic logging. Wilson raised an eyebrow when I signed it out, but didn't ask questions. We were through the outer perimeter gate by 0630, rolling past the agricultural domes toward the empty terrain beyond the city's edge. The landscape outside Cradle City matched the original survey reports. Rocky plains, sparse vegetation adapted to Kepler 5's dry climate, the kind of marginal terrain that made colonial expansion difficult, but not impossible. The original settlers had chosen this location for its mineral deposits and stable geology. A reasonable choice. A defensible choice. The nav system showed nothing but empty ground ahead of us. No structures or roads within its resolution, but the original landing site had been 12 kilometers northwest of the current city center. The founding charter included coordinates. If anything remained of Kepler Landing, that's where it would be. I drove. Marsh watched the terrain through the crawler's viewports, occasionally checking the geological sensors for subsurface anomalies. There. He pointed toward a ridge 200 meters ahead. Something was visible at its base, a dark shape that didn't match the surrounding rock formations. I brought the crawler to a stop and we got out. The morning air was cold and thin. I could feel the altitude in my lungs, that particular tightness that came from breathing atmosphere that wasn't quite right for human physiology. The dark shape resolved as we approached. A wall. Partially collapsed, buried under 30 years of accumulated rubble, but unmistakably artificial. The construction style was nothing like the organic curves of Cradle City. This was standard colonial architecture, prefabricated panels bolted together in the utilitarian fashion the company had used for decades. This is it. My voice came out strange, thick with something I didn't want to name. This is Kepler Landing. Marsh crouched next to the wall and brushed away rubble. His hand came back covered in grey dust, the same grey dust I'd found on my own hands yesterday. These panels, they're company standard, but the design is at least 30 years out of date, maybe older. He looked up at me. This matches your timeline. We spent the next 2 hours excavating. The habitat module had collapsed inward, its roof buckled under the weight of rubble and time. But the structure held together beneath the rubble, walls still standing, equipment still in place, the fossilized remains of a colonial settlement caught in the moment of its failure. I catalogued everything. Water recyclers that matched the 30-year-old manifests. Atmosphere processors with company logos that hadn't been used since the early expansion era. Crates of supplies still sealed, their contents never touched. Medical equipment, agricultural tools, personal effects, clothing, tablets, the small objects that people carried with them when they left Earth to build new lives on distant worlds. Everything the original colonists would have needed. Everything they had apparently stopped using. Morgan. Marsh's voice came from deeper in the structure, where a collapsed wall panel had created a small chamber. I picked my way through the rubble to reach him. He was standing very still, his survey light pointed at the floor. Bones. Human remains, desiccated by decades in the dry atmosphere. 17 skulls arranged in a circle, long bones radiating outward from the circle's center like spokes on a wheel. Smaller bones, fingers, toes, vertebrae, filling the spaces between, laid out with too much precision to be accidental. This is ritualistic. Marsh's voice had gone flat, the professional detachment of someone trying not to process what he was seeing. Some kind of ceremony, mass suicide maybe, or... The colonists didn't do this. He looked at me. Look at the pattern. I crouched at the edge of the arrangement, careful not to disturb anything. This layout doesn't match any religious iconography I've ever seen documented. Whoever arranged this sorted the pieces. Skull circle in the center, long bones in categories, smaller bones filling the gaps. It looks like an anatomical study. Toward the center of the circle, the long bones were sorted by type. Femurs in one section, tibias in another, humeri in a third. The smaller bones filled the gaps with the precision of a filing system. Something had arranged these remains. Something had taken the bodies of dead colonists and laid them out like specimens, like components, like raw material waiting to be used. The bones are incomplete. Marsh had noticed it too. Look, some of the skulls are missing mandibles. The long bones don't match up to full skeletons. There should be more material here if these were complete bodies. I counted the skulls again. 17. The original colony had 1,700 settlers. This is 1% of them. 17 out of 1,700. Where are the rest? I didn't answer. I was thinking about the city on the horizon, the 200,000 people who had no memory of anything before year zero. I was thinking about the cradle at the center of it all, dreaming. You couldn't dream from nothing. You couldn't create matter from imagination. Something had to be there first. A substrate, a foundation, raw material to build from. 1,700 colonists had died here, and something had used what was left of them to dream a city into existence. We photographed everything. Bagged samples, bone fragments, equipment components, soil from the arrangement site. Standard archaeological protocols, the kind of documentation that would hold up to company review. The drive back was quiet. Marsh kept his eyes on the horizon, watching Cradle City grow larger as we approached. The concentric rings, the dark mass at the center. 200,000 people going about their lives, unaware that they were built from the dead. What are we going to report? I didn't have an answer. The evidence in our sample bags was clear. The original colony had failed. Everyone had died. Something had arranged their remains in patterns that suggested analysis, categorization, learning. And then, 7 years after the colony's founding, year zero had begun. The cradle had woken. It had studied what humans were, and it had dreamed them back into existence, not from memory of their lives, but from matter, from the raw material of their bodies and their structures and whatever residual patterns they'd left behind. The colonists of Cradle City weren't survivors. They were reconstructions, dreams made solid. The cradle's best guess at what human beings were supposed to be. No wonder they had no memory of before. There was no continuity to remember. Just a sleeping thing that had learned the shape of people and built 200,000 copies from the fragments of 1,700 originals. Morgan, checkpoint ahead. I looked up. We were approaching the outer perimeter of Cradle City, the same route we'd taken on our way out. A small structure stood by the side of the road, staffed by a figure in pale robes. That building hadn't been there this morning. Are you sure? Marsh asked. I checked the nav system's recorded route. We'd passed this exact point 4 hours ago. The route showed a smooth line across empty road, without any stop or side structure marked. The figure stepped forward as we approached, an older woman with grey hair and kind eyes. She raised her hand in a gesture that was half greeting, half instruction to stop. I brought the crawler to a halt and lowered the window. "Welcome back." Her voice was warm, maternal. "We've been expecting you." "Expecting us?" "The Cradle knows you found the old place. It appreciates your diligence." She smiled, and there was nothing threatening in it, just the patient kindness of someone explaining something obvious to a slow learner. Some things are better left buried, of course, but the Cradle understands curiosity. It was curious once too when it first woke. It wanted to know what people were, what they were made of, what they meant. "You know about the original colony, the bodies. I know the Cradle learned from them. I know it built us from what it found. No hesitation, no confusion, no denial, just acceptance. We are dreams made from the dead, Mr. Morgan. Most of us prefer not to think about it too directly, but the Cradle doesn't hide what it is. It simply dreams. And as long as it dreams, we continue." "What happens when it wakes?" The kindness in her eyes flickered, just for a moment. "We hope never to find out." She stepped back from the crawler and gestured for us to proceed. I raised the window and drove past her, through the checkpoint that hadn't existed 4 hours ago, into the city that shouldn't exist at all. Marsh was staring at his hands. "I don't remember stopping," he said. "What?" "The checkpoint, the conversation. I remember driving toward the city, and then I remember driving into the city, but I don't remember stopping. I don't remember her." I checked the nav system's log. Our recorded route showed continuous movement, no halt, no gap, no checkpoint interaction. According to the system, we'd driven straight through. Our chronometers told a different story. We were 40 minutes behind where we should have been. I thought about the 43 minutes I'd lost yesterday, the corridor I didn't remember entering, the notes in handwriting that was almost mine. The gaps were spreading. Whatever the Cradle was doing, learning us, integrating us, whatever word the colonists used for it, it was accelerating. "We need to get back to the ship." The ship was quiet when we returned. The cargo hold was empty of crew, the corridors deserted in a way that felt wrong for mid-afternoon. I found Orbach in the command center, staring at a display I couldn't read from the doorway. "Captain?" She didn't turn around. "Where have you been?" "The outer perimeter, looking for the original colony." "Did you find it?" "Yes." Now she turned. Her face had the same flatness I'd seen 2 days ago when she'd first looked at the city from orbit. The expression of someone running calculations they didn't want to complete. "And?" I told her. "The habitat, the equipment, the bones arranged in patterns that suggested something learning what humans were. The checkpoint that hadn't existed earlier, the 40 minutes we'd lost, the woman who'd told us what the colonists were." Orbach listened without interrupting. When I finished, she turned back to her display. "I've been running crew counts all afternoon, trying to account for everyone, trying to figure out why the ship feels so empty. And? We're missing people. I don't know how many. I can't..." She stopped. Her hands were gripping the console hard enough to whiten her knuckles. "I can't remember their faces. I have names on a roster that don't mean anything to me. I look at the duty assignments and see gaps. People scheduled for shifts who I can't picture, who I can't remember ever meeting. How many? I don't know. That's the problem. I don't know how many people we arrived with. I don't know how many we're supposed to have. Every time I try to count, the numbers slide around." She turned back to me, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes from losing your grip on something fundamental. "Morgan, what is happening to us?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't have anything except the equipment tag in my pocket, and the sample bags in the crawler, and the growing certainty that we were being taken apart piece by piece, memory by memory, person by person. We leave at dawn. Emergency extraction. No more assessment, no more documentation. We file what we have from orbit and we never come back. Agreed. She nodded, a sharp motion that was meant to look decisive, but came across as desperate. Get some rest. Check in with the remaining crew. Make sure everyone knows the departure schedule. The remaining crew. As if we both knew, without being able to say it, that the crew we left with wouldn't be the crew we'd arrived with. I went to my cabin. I didn't rest. At 2200, I left the ship. I told myself I was doing a final perimeter check, making sure the landing pad was secure, the equipment was stowed, the ground vehicles were accounted for, standard departure protocols. But my feet carried me toward the transit station, and I didn't stop them. The outer ring was quiet at night. Residential blocks dark except for the occasional lit window. The transit platforms nearly empty. I boarded a car heading inward and watched the city scroll past, the rings tightening as we approached the center. I got off at the third ring, walked past the checkpoints without stopping. The attendants noted my passage but didn't interfere. The plaza opened before me, dark and silent. The kneeling figures were still there, fewer than before, maybe 24 scattered across the open space. The cradle rose against the night sky, darker than the darkness around it, a mass of sleeping weight that pulled everything toward itself. I stood at the edge of the plaza and watched. One of the kneeling figures looked up. She was wearing a company jumpsuit. I had never seen her before. She rose and walked toward me, and her gait was strange, not quite natural, not quite coordinated, like someone learning how to use a body they hadn't been born with. You're from the ship. Her voice was warm, conversational. I think I was too, before. Before what? Before I came here, before I understood. She stopped a few meters away, close enough that I could see her face clearly. Young, maybe mid-20s, brown hair, features that were pleasant but somehow generic, like a composite sketch rather than a real person. I worked in cargo, I think. Before. I don't remember exactly, but I know I'm supposed to be here now. The cradle showed me. Showed you what? What I really am. What we all really are. She smiled, and it was the same patient, kind smile the woman at the checkpoint had worn. Dreams, Mr. Morgan. We're all dreams. The cradle imagines us, and as long as it sleeps, we exist. Before I understood that, I was afraid. I thought I was losing myself, but I wasn't losing anything. I was becoming what I was always supposed to be. You were part of my crew. You came here on my ship. Maybe. Probably. It doesn't matter now. She gestured toward the cradle, the dark mass that dominated the sky. The cradle will learn you too, eventually. It's already started. I can see it in you. The gaps, the uncertainty, the way you're holding onto that little piece of metal in your pocket like it's the only real thing in the world. My hand had gone to the equipment tag without my willing it. I pulled it out, held it up. This is real. This is from the original colony. This proves that something existed before year zero. Does it? She tilted her head, curious. Or does it show that the cradle can't dream everything perfectly? That sometimes pieces of the old substrate push through, like bones breaking the surface of a grave? I backed away, one step, then another. I'm leaving tomorrow. My whole crew is leaving. Whatever is happening here, some of your crew is leaving, the ones the cradle has decided to let go. She wasn't following me, just watching with that patient, curious expression. The rest of us will stay. We'll become part of the dream, and eventually, we won't remember being anything else. Just like everyone in this city. Just like everyone the cradle has ever learned. I turned and walked away. Across the plaza, through the checkpoints, down the transit platform to an empty car that carried me back toward the outer ring. She didn't follow. The ship was dark when I returned. 0300. Most of the crew would be sleeping, conserving energy for the departure. Orbach was waiting at the top of the cargo ramp. I've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. Your communicator was dead. I checked the device on my belt. Powered down. I didn't remember turning it off. I went into the city. I needed to. I don't care what you needed. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the fractures underneath. I just finished another crew count. We're missing 2 more. Wilson can't account for anyone who was supposed to be on perimeter watch between 2000 and 2400. The duty roster shows names, but no one can remember who they were. I saw one of them, in the inner ring, kneeling at the cradle. Who? I don't know. She was wearing our mission patch. She said she used to work in cargo. Orbach's face did something complicated. We don't have anyone in cargo besides you. We've never had anyone in cargo besides you. I thought about that, tried to remember. The cargo bay, the manifests, the endless inventories I'd conducted over 18 months of transit. Had there been anyone else? Had I ever worked with a partner, a subordinate, someone who handled the physical labor while I managed the documentation? I couldn't find the memory. The space where it should have been felt smooth and empty, like a wound that had healed without scarring. How many people did we arrive with? Orbach pulled up the crew roster on her tablet, held it out so I could see. 23 names. I read through them, matching faces to entries. Orbach, Dahl, Marsh, Wilson. 16 others I could picture clearly. People I'd worked with for years, people whose habits and histories I knew. 4 names that meant nothing. I read them out loud. No faces came with those names. No memories. Just entries on a manifest that might as well have been fiction. I can see 19 people. The other 4, they're ghosts on paper. Orbach's voice was quiet. They're on every official roster. Their signatures are on equipment logs, duty reports, supply requests. But no one on this ship can remember what they looked like. No one can recall a single conversation with them. As far as our memories are concerned, they never existed. The second name on the list, same surname as mine. Was there another Morgan on this crew? According to the documentation, yes. According to everyone's memory, no. Orbach took the tablet back, stared at it like it had betrayed her. We leave at dawn. Whatever we're losing, we stop losing it the moment we break orbit. That's the theory anyway. And if the theory is wrong? She didn't answer. I went to my cabin and pulled up the original crew manifest from the pre-departure records. 23 names, 23 faces in the personnel photos, smiling the way people smile when they're being documented for posterity. 19 of those faces I recognized. 4 of them looked like strangers. One of those strangers shared my surname and had features that, if I squinted, might have been similar to mine. A cousin, maybe. A brother. Someone who had shipped out with me on an 18-month journey and then vanished into the Cradle's dream without leaving so much as a memory behind. I looked at his face for a long time, trying to feel something. Grief, loss, even curiosity about who he'd been and what he'd meant to me. Nothing. Just a photograph of a stranger on a manifest that said we'd shared a name. The equipment tag sat on my desk, rusted and real. I picked it up, held it against the light, read the date stamped into the metal. 2137. 35 years ago. The original colony that had died and been dreamed back to life as something else. In a few hours, we'd break orbit. We'd leave Kepler 5 behind. We'd file our reports and never come back. But the crew that left wouldn't be the crew that had arrived. We'd already lost pieces we couldn't remember having. We'd already been partially rewritten, our memories smoothed over, our histories revised. The Cradle was patient. The Cradle provided. And the Cradle had already learned more of us than we knew. I put the tag back in my pocket and waited for dawn. Launch prep started at 0500. I watched the crew move through their checklists from my position in the cargo hold, counting heads, matching faces to names. 19 people I recognized. 19 people going about the business of departure with a smoothness that felt rehearsed. No one mentioned the missing 4. I'd expected questions. Confusion at least. 23 names on the original roster, 19 faces in the corridors. Someone should have noticed the gap. Someone should have asked where Keller and Rodriguez and Butt had gone. Should have wondered about the other Morgan whose photograph showed a face that might have been family. But the crew moved through their tasks, and the missing names never came up. As if the question of who they'd been had become impolite to raise. As if we'd all agreed, without discussing it, that some things were better left unexamined. I turned back to the cargo hold and pulled up my manifest. The emergency supplies were still there. 18 months of rations, medical equipment, water purification systems, everything we'd brought for a colony that didn't need any of it. Row after row of company crates, properly logged, properly secured. New entries had appeared among them. I didn't remember authorizing any transfers. I didn't remember anyone from Cradle City coming aboard to load cargo. The documentation insisted otherwise. 6 items received yesterday, logged and secured according to standard protocols. My signature on every line. I walked down the rows until I found them. The new crates were smaller than our standard equipment containers, made from a material I didn't recognize. The same organic quality I'd seen in the Cradle's architecture. The same unease that made my eyes want to slide away. I put my hand on the nearest crate. It was warm. Not hot, not feverish, just slightly warmer than the ambient temperature of the hold. Like something inside was generating heat. Like something inside was alive. The manifest listed the contents as agricultural samples. Everything ready for departure. I turned. Marsh was standing at the hold entrance, tablet in hand. The cargo is secured. Good. Captain wants everyone at stations in 20 minutes. Launch window opens at 0630. He didn't ask about the new crates. He didn't seem to notice them at all, even though they were clearly visible from where he stood. Dark containers that didn't match anything else in the hold, warm to the touch, logged under my signature. Marsh, these crates here, the ones from Cradle City. He looked where I was pointing. His expression didn't change. What about them? Do you remember when they were loaded? A pause. Something flickered behind his eyes, confusion, or the edge of a question he didn't want to ask. They're on your manifest. You must have processed them. I don't remember processing them. Then check your logs. He turned away, already moving toward the exit. 20 minutes, Morgan. Don't be late. I watched him go. Then I looked down at my manifest pad, at the signatures that were mine, at the timestamps that showed I'd authorized these transfers less than 12 hours ago. My handwriting, my authorization codes, my name on every line. I didn't remember any of it. The launch window opened on schedule. I strapped into my station in the cargo bay office, surrounded by monitors displaying inventory status and atmospheric readings, and all the mundane data that defined my job. Through the small viewport above my desk, I could see the edge of the landing pad, the outer ring of Cradle City, the dark shape of the cradle itself rising against the morning sky. The engines engaged. The ship trembled, then steadied, then began to rise. I watched the city fall away beneath us. The concentric rings contracted as we gained altitude, collapsing from distinct structures into abstract patterns, the whole arrangement shrinking until it looked like a target with the cradle at its center. A bullseye, a wound. Dahl's voice came over the intercom. Clearing municipal airspace, transitioning to orbital insertion. The cradle remained visible as we climbed, a dark point at the center of everything, smaller now but somehow no less present. I could feel it watching us go. Not with anger, not with urgency, just the patient attention of something that had gotten what it needed and was content to wait. We broke through the upper atmosphere. Kepler 5 curved beneath us, brown and grey and unremarkable except for the single bright point where 200,000 people lived their borrowed lives. The cradle was invisible now, lost in the scale of continents and oceans, but I knew exactly where it lay. I could have pointed to it with my eyes closed. Orbital insertion complete. Dahl again. Beginning transit calculations. Estimated departure window in 47 minutes. I unstrapped from my station and walked to the observation port at the end of the corridor. The planet turned slowly below, and I pressed my hand against the cold viewport and tried to feel something. Relief. Escape. The lifting of a weight I'd been carrying since we first saw lights where there should have been darkness. Nothing. Just the dull awareness that I was leaving pieces of myself behind, and I would never know exactly what I'd lost. The contact report was waiting at my station when I returned. Standard colonial authority format. Assessment summary, resource evaluation, infrastructure analysis, population statistics, recommended follow-up actions. The kind of document I'd filed dozens of times before for colonies living and dead, the bureaucratic endpoint of every resupply mission. Half the fields were already completed. My handwriting, my observations, my conclusions, laid out in the neat professional prose that 15 years of cargo logistics had drilled into me. Colony status, thriving. Municipal infrastructure exceeds standard colonial benchmarks. Population stable at approximately 200,000. Agricultural output sufficient for local needs with export capacity. Manufacturing capabilities developing. Cultural institutions well established. Resource needs minimal. Emergency provisions delivered but local stocks adequate. Recommend reducing future resupply allocations. Infrastructure assessment excellent. Central structure, the Cradle, serves as civic and cultural focal point. Unique architectural style reflects local adaptation. Municipal planning demonstrates sophisticated understanding of resource distribution and population management. Recommended actions: establish regular supply route, prioritize cultural exchange program, authorize additional survey missions to assess export potential and integration opportunities. I read through it twice. The words were mine, my phrasing, my structure, my professional voice, but I didn't remember writing them. The timestamp showed I'd started the document at 0400 this morning, 3 hours before I'd woken up. During hours I had no memory of being awake. Integration opportunities. The phrase sat in the middle of a paragraph about economic development, innocent and bureaucratic. But I kept coming back to it. Integration. The same word the woman at the checkpoint had used. The same word that had appeared in the notes I'd found and lost in those 43 missing minutes. Integration protocols proceeding within expected parameters. This report would go to colonial authority. They would read it, file it, add it to their planning databases. They would see a thriving colony with export potential and cultural resources worth studying. They would schedule more ships, more crews, more raw material for the Cradle to learn. My finger hovered over the submit key. I thought about the woman in the plaza, the company jumpsuit, the patient smile of someone who used to be something else before she understood what she really was. I thought about the bones arranged in circles, 17 skulls, the substrate the dream was built from. I thought about the 4 names on our crew roster that no one could remember, the gaps in our documentation, the pieces we'd already lost without knowing we'd ever had them. I thought about the crates in the cargo hold, warm and waiting, logged as agricultural samples with my signature on every line. The report was exactly what the company wanted to hear. Thriving colony, minimal needs, excellent infrastructure, recommend further contact. It was also exactly what the Cradle wanted the company to hear. More ships would come, more crews, more people who would land on that pad in the outer ring and walk through those checkpoints and stand in that plaza and feel the weight of something dreaming them into compliance. Some of them would leave, like we were leaving, carrying cargo they didn't remember loading and memories they didn't know they'd lost. Some of them would stay, like the woman in the jumpsuit, kneeling at the base of something that had learned them so thoroughly they couldn't remember being anything else. The dream would spread, one ship at a time, one report at a time, one compliant cargo manifest officer at a time. I could refuse to file it. I could write something else, a warning, A contamination report. A recommendation to quarantine Kepler 5 and never send another ship. I had the authority. I had evidence of something wrong. The equipment tag in my pocket, the photographs of the bones, the sample bags still stored in the crawler. But that would mean admitting what had happened to us. 4 crew members gone, erased so completely that no one could remember their faces. Cargo loaded without authorization. Hours lost to gaps that no one could explain. If I filed a contamination report, there would be questions, investigations, psychological evaluations. The company would want to know exactly what we'd lost and exactly what we'd brought back. And I would have to sit in a sterile room somewhere and try to explain that I'd had a crew of 23 and now I had a crew of 19, that somewhere on Kepler 5, 4 people who might have been my friends or colleagues or family had stopped existing in any way that mattered, that I couldn't remember their faces or their voices or a single conversation I'd ever had with them. I would have to admit that I wasn't the same person who'd left Earth 18 months ago, that pieces of me had been rewritten, that whatever had filed this report, whatever had signed those cargo manifests, whatever was sitting at this station with its finger over the submit key, it might look like Garrett Morgan, might have his memories and his voice and his 15 years of logistics experience, but it wasn't entirely him anymore. The report was easier. The report was just paperwork. I pressed submit. The system confirmed transmission. The data packet launched itself toward the nearest relay, beginning its long journey back to Colonial Authority headquarters. Somewhere eventually, a scheduling algorithm would pass my recommendations and add Kepler 5 to the Colonial supply route. More ships would be assigned, more crews would be briefed, more people would make the 18-month journey to a world where something was waiting to learn them. I closed the terminal and sat for a long moment in the quiet of my station. Through the viewport, Kepler 5 was shrinking. Just another planet now, just another point of light in an ocean of points, no different from 1,000 other marginal worlds where the company had tried to build something and mostly failed. Except this one had succeeded. This one was thriving. This one would be held up as a model of colonial resilience, a settlement that had gone dark for 30 years and emerged stronger than ever. The bureaucrats would study it, the planners would cite it, the recruiters would use it to convince the next wave of settlers that distant worlds could become homes. And at the center of it all, the Cradle would keep dreaming, patient, hungry, building its city one learned mind at a time. Orbach found me at the observation port 2 hours later. We're clear. Transit calculations complete. 18 months to the nearest hub. I nodded without turning around. The planet was barely visible now, a dim speck that could have been any of a dozen similar bodies in this system. I filed the contact report. I saw, thriving colony, recommend further contact, exactly what the company wanted to hear. It's what the evidence supports. Is it? I turned to face her. She looked tired, the same bone-deep exhaustion I felt, the kind that sleep couldn't touch because it wasn't physical. The colony is functioning. The infrastructure is sound. The population is stable. Whatever happened to the original settlers, the current inhabitants have built something that works. I heard myself saying the words and wondered if I believed them. Wondered if believing them mattered. That's what my assessment shows. That's what I reported. Orbach studied me for a long moment. I couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if she was judging me or just trying to figure out what I'd become. The cargo you logged. The crates from Cradle City. Agricultural samples. Cultural materials. Standard exchange items. You don't remember loading them. They're on my manifest. My signature is on every line. That's not what I asked. The silence stretched between us. Through the viewport, the stars were cold and still. No, I finally said. I don't remember loading them. I don't remember authorizing the transfer, but the documentation is complete and the cargo is secured and we're leaving. That's what matters. Is it? I didn't answer. After a moment, Orbach nodded. Not agreement exactly, but acceptance of a situation neither of us could change. Dahl's breaking out a bottle. The crew wants to celebrate clearing orbit. You should join them. I'll be there. She left. I stayed at the viewport a while longer, watching the stars, trying to remember if I'd always looked at them this way, or if something had changed in how I saw the dark. The celebration was in the common area. Dahl had produced a bottle of something amber that he'd been saving for a successful mission, and the crew was passing it around with the particular enthusiasm of people who'd survived something they didn't fully understand. I took a cup when it came to me. The liquid was sharp and warm. I drank it and felt nothing. Someone told a joke. Laughter rippled through the room. Marsh's baritone, Wilson's higher pitch, the others filling in the spaces between. I laughed too, a moment behind the rest, the sound coming out of my throat without passing through whatever part of me decided whether things were funny. Dahl raised his cup. To successful contact. To coming home. The crew echoed him. I moved my lips with the words. Through the common area's viewport, Kepler 5 was gone. Just stars now. Just the familiar void of transit space. 18 months of nothing between us and the next human outpost. I thought about the cargo hold, 3 decks below, the crates that were warm to the touch, the contents logged as agricultural samples, cultural materials, archival records, my signature on every line. I would never open them. I knew that with a certainty that went deeper than decision. Whatever was in those crates, whatever piece of the cradle was traveling with us toward the hub, toward other ships and other crews and other worlds, I would never look at it directly. I would process the manifests and file the transfer documentation and watch the crates get unloaded at our destination. And I would never ask what happened to them after that. Someone would take them somewhere. Someone would open them. Someone would find whatever the cradle had sent, and they would do whatever the contents required, and the dream would spread a little further into the dark. And I would have done my job, perfectly, exactly as I was supposed to. Marsh clapped me on the shoulder. You okay? You look distant. Just tired. Long mission. Almost over now. 18 months and we're home. Home. I tried to remember what that word meant. A place I'd left almost 3 years ago. A life I'd had before cargo manifests and dead colonies and things that dreamed entire cities into existence. It felt like something that had happened to someone else. Yeah, I said. Almost over. The bottle came around again. I drank. The crew laughed at another joke I didn't hear. The stars turned slowly past the viewport, cold and patient, and somewhere in the hold, a crate that shouldn't exist sat in perfect silence, waiting to be delivered. The dream was patient. The dream provided. And Garrett Morgan, cargo manifest officer, had done his job.